Hey everyone, welcome to Wandering Jews with Mijal and Noam.
I'm Mijal.
And I'm Noam, and this podcast is our way of trying to figure out the Jewish world. We do not have it all figured out, but we like to try to figure a lot of big ideas out together.
As we always say, we really love to hear from you, so please email us at wanderingjews@jewishnpack.com and leave us a voicemail at 833-WON-JEWS.
I love it. I love that we're back. It feels good to be back. Mijal, it's been a little bit of a while. And it's been a pretty intense the last few months, but we're going to get into the story of Rosh Hashanah today. And I want to start off with our newest segment called Listener Wonder. And what Listener Wonder is, we take a question from one of you listening. And this is what Tammy asked us. So Tammy, love Tammy. Tammy asked, in preparation for the holiday, what's your favorite Rosh Hashanah ritual? So what is it, Mijal?
I guess it is. So in Sephardic communities, the nights of Rosh Hashanah, we do a seder with simanim, with like a lot of simanim. It's like signs. So it's like a lot of foods that have different meanings. So I think you guys do like apple and honey, and maybe like the head of a fish and pomegranates. Is that it?
Yeah, we do a lot of the symbols also. We do that.
I haven't heard other people call it the Rosh Hashanah seder. But I love honestly getting those foods from in my family, my mother and my mother-in-law both make, and we get to have different kinds of food for Rosh Hashanah night, which is very special.
I mean, I love those things also. Can I just be specific? I like when we get to the leeks. So the leek part, I like when you cut off your enemies. That's the whole idea. Like you cut off your enemies. And my wife, Razy, gets very animated. She will take anyone down. So when she's in the zone, then I'm like, okay, it's Rosh Hashanah. She will take on her enemies. That's my favorite. If you mess with Razy, it's the dumbest thing in the world you could do. So I get scared. I'm like, I cower. You can imagine me. I get a little cowery.
Of course.
But she's ready to take on anyone. So that's my favorite. So thank you, Tammy, for that question. Mijal, we're gonna let's do this. Let's talk about Rosh Hashanah. It's the new year. I want to talk about the high holidays with you. We're entering the high holidays in a totally different setting and scene and feeling than I think that I could ever imagine in my life. I want to pick on you or ask you to help me and us plan for Rosh Hashanah and to talk about what's been on your mind. What have you been thinking about? What have you been wondering about leading up to the high holidays?
So no, first let's just acknowledge a little bit, because I think it's good to name these things. What is it that we're living through right now? Israel is at war, right? Not just the South, but the North. Hostages still missing, anti-Semitism still on the rise. We're getting closer to the anniversary of October 7th. And I know that I've actually heard from so many people who they're struggling. Like the high holidays are not simple in general. And they're struggling even more this year. Like, how do we approach these days? How do we think about them? How do we say the words that we've said every single year, but imbue them with the meaning of what this year has given to us? So I think it's just like you're saying, it's different and it's really challenging. And the first thing we have to do is name that a little bit. I want to read something to you, actually, Noam. Okay. There's a very powerful letter from a rabbi in Israel. His name is Rabbi Yoni Rosensweig. I've actually never met him in person, but he has an interesting thing. He will often offer people and strangers the opportunity to ask him questions on Facebook.
Okay.
So I've messaged him and I've sent him questions in the past, and he's just incredibly generous. But Rabbi Rosensweig sent a very powerful letter to his community that we're going to include in the show notes.
Okay.
And this is a letter to his Israeli community, and I'll just read some parts of it. So he writes, "Dear Netzach Menashe community, we stand at the threshold of the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, followed by Sukkot and Simchat Torah. Even in years marked by no special occurrences, these days are not easy and bring up difficult emotions. How much more so in a year like this? In the past year, we have been dealing within the confines of our small community and outside of it with difficult, practical, emotional, and spiritual pressures and hardships. Family members who were murdered by a terrible enemy, hostages who are still being held by their captors, families who were evacuated from their homes a year ago and still don't know when they will return, injured soldiers and civilians who have been in rehabilitation for months with many more years ahead of them, relatives who are in reserve duty for the third and fourth time this year, soldiers who dedicate their lives and at times give their lives for our security and the security of our country, etc. The burden looms large and affects us continuously. When we come to the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, there is no doubt that we can expect a roller coaster of emotions. And he adds here also the connection to this time, this year. The secular date, October 7th, falls between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The holiday of Simchat Torah itself will be particularly charged. And of course, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these days of judgment and mercy with the charged emotions they raise in their wake, will be difficult and complex. Let us not forget for even a moment, among us there are families who lost their loved ones in the last year. We will look left and right in our shul, and we will see men and women who have gone through a challenging year like no other. All this requires of us special sensitivity. I'll read a little bit more now. I know it's long, but I think this is really worthwhile. Yeah. But the emotional pendulum does not swing in only one direction. Many families saw miracles this year. How many soldiers do we know returned home safely? How many of the wounded almost lost their lives in the battlefield? How many families had their loved ones who returned from captivity alive in a hostage deal or because of IDF activity? And how many feel that with all the sorrow that we are experiencing, it is divine blessing to be living in our own sovereign country, especially in times of war? And that the blessed fact that Hashem, that God has brought us to a place where destiny is in our hands, is emphasized precisely when our enemies rise up against us to destroy us. I know many members of the community who will stand before God this year and will not only cry before God with a heart broken in two, but will also thank God for what we have in spite of everything. There's so much here, Noam. This roller coaster of emotions. How does this resonate? What roller coaster of emotions have you seen?
How does it resonate? I mean, this is a powerful piece. The roller coaster of emotions is true for all of us. I was going to ask you though. Tell me if I'm off here, but at least from my experience, Rosh Hashanah, even Yom Kippur and Sukkot and Simchat Torah, they're the most joyful. It is the most joyful time of year. It's just joy. And that's the roller coaster of emotions. It's the guilt of feeling that joy right now. It's the inability to feel that joy. It's maybe even the theological disposition that says, I don't want to feel that joy. And how dare you even ask me to be part of that joy?
So, no, it's been, I've heard just people be in so many different places. Like you said, some people feel a lot of guilt, like getting ready for the holidays, spending a lot of money, putting things together while thinking about like all the families that are evacuees in Israel or people struggling financially in a way they hadn't before, or reservists. I've heard from some people a lot of anger against God. How can we stand before a God and say words that imply that you get rewarded or punished based on your behavior, and then think about October 7th and like, what did those people do? And how can we say these words in light of what happened? Like a lot of, big theological questions about what it means to pray, to say these words, to mean these words after going through this kind of year. I had this funny experience of just meeting people that are, I think more than every other year, actually craving a spiritual connection this year, of just feeling like, there's so much noise and so many problems, and the world is so vast and its problems are so overwhelming. But then that actually being almost like a push to say, okay, what does it mean to be a soul in this world? How do I work on myself? How do I become better? Because that's actually an area where I could have some control in what I do. So that's been some of what I've been seeing as well.
The question that you brought up earlier about the challenges that people feel about the theological questions, like how could God do this? And then like go into Rosh Hashanah and joyful. I think that's a distinct issue this year on the collective level, but that's an issue that I feel theologically every year, right? Like meaning that's not a unique issue on the individual religious. That's always the case. How did God allow A, B, and C to happen? Does God have control of these sorts of things? Right? Is that really what's going on here? And then at the collective level, I just feel like Rosh Hashanah, when we describe the Jewish people, when we describe ourselves as having this like treasured relationship with God, that treasured relationship could feel burdensome and exhausting and fatiguing. And maybe if this is what it's about, some people are like, I don't want it. But the letter that you just read was uplifting. It was somehow uplifting to be like, no, this matters. And this, I don't know if maybe this is the wrong term, Michal. Trade-off is worth it.
What do you mean? Sorry, I don't think what do you mean?
There's a trade-off of being God's, having a very close relationship with God. Again, I'm being very careful how I describe it, the chosen people, what that means. And every nation describes themselves that way. But it's exhausting. To be the Jewish people at times. That's the way I'm thinking about it right now. It's exhausting, Michal.
Yeah. So it's interesting, Noam. We could spend a whole lot of time with those theological questions. I just want to articulate it one more time, because I think a lot of people have this conception that you go into the Rosh Hashanah, Day of Judgment, and there's like this God in the skies with like 2 books, and it's like, oh, you've been good this year, great. I'm going to give you health. Here you go. You've been bad this year, terrible things to your family. And that is like, first of all, it doesn't feel empirically true looking at the world. Our rabbis have spoken a lot about like theodicy, that we don't really see the world and how it works kind of like correspond to those kind of actions.
Right.
And I would say it's even more complicated because our liturgy says this over and over again, like, God, we are good, please give us good things. So that's a very, very big question. I would recommend, by the way, Noam, for folks who are looking for something to read that actually, anybody who's listening, that gets to this question of like the theological questions around reward and punishment in the high holidays. Have you read the book, This is Real and You're Completely Unprepared by Alan Liu?
Come on, Alan Liu. It's incredible.
Okay.
I thought that that was like a secret book that I had
not so secret because I've probably recommended it to 300 people in the last 2 weeks.
It is excellent.
It's so good.
It's an excellent book.
Good. Yeah, if you haven't, and by the way, I'll say something, Noam. I reread it every year. There's like 2 books that I read at this time of year, and that's one of them.
I do too.
Yeah,
Michal.
we are more similar than what we thought, Noam, I guess. Yeah. But then let me just say one more thing that I maybe just want to, let me share one idea with you that I'm thinking about this year.
I need a good idea.
Okay.
Give me a good one.
I think part of the glory of our tradition is that our holidays, our liturgy, our calendar are very capacious. These are days.
What does capacious mean?
Capacious, I don't know the translation into your English. Capacidad, like capacious.
Do your best.
Sorry.
Do your best.
They can contain multitudes.
Yes. Okay.
And I think to me there's something very powerful that Jews across time and space have gone through these days in joy and in suffering. In Jerusalem and in exile. And our liturgy contains so many facets within it. Some people feel if you're very linear and very structured and you want to be like, hey, what's the one meaning of the day? Then it can be frustrating. But if you are feeling this roller coaster of emotions, or if our people are feeling this roller coaster of emotions as we go into Rosh Hashanah at the beginning of the year, I actually think it's incredibly powerful because you can hold on to something and you can take on one of the facets and lean into it. So let's take one example. Rosh Hashanah, just to remind all of us, it's one of 4 new years that the rabbis mark. It's the new year in which the creation of humanity is being remembered. So basically, it's the birthday of Adam and Eve, all of our shared ancestors. And according to our tradition, and this was kind of developed over time, according to our tradition, this is not only a time to mark the birth of humanity, it is also a day in which God sits in judgment. And that judgment, I would say, has 2 layers. One layer is all of our actions go before God. And the other layer is God passes judgment upon us and what is going to, become of us. Of course, we named before, there's big theological questions there.
Right. Sounds very judgy right now. Well, it is.
Well, yeah, it is judgy.
Yeah, it is judgy, right? It's called Judgment Day for a reason, Yom HaDin.
Yes.
Okay.
It is. It's Yom HaNorah. It's like it's supposed to be a not easy day.
But it's also a joyful day. But it's a very joyful day.
Okay, good. So we're getting there to the themes, right? So let me just...
Not a sad day. It's a serious and joyful day.
It's a serious and joyful day. And I think that it has room for a lot of emotions and a lot of ways that we can stand. So 2 of the most famous words that we use, generally in the Yamim Noraim, in the days of the high holidays, going into from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, are the 2 names for God, Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu, we say it in Slichot. Slichot are the poetical liturgy that we Sephardic Jews have been saying for way longer than you guys.
For 3 months.
Not 3 months.
3 months now.
But,
6 months. How many? No, half the year. Half the year.
No, not half the year. But we've been staying longer than you guys. That's where we do all of that, chatati.
As of the time of this recording, we haven't started yet, the Ashkenazim.
Right. That's where we do all the guilty confessions for all the rice we eat on Passover. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
So Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And there's something to me really, really powerful about these words that I actually want to look at in terms of this year, going into Rosh Hashanah, in the shadow of October 7th, going into the anniversary of October 7th, right, before Simchat Torah. Each of these words, Avinu and Malkeinu, is a window into a different orientation that we inhabit as we go into this holiday, okay? And I want to look at each of them through a different poem that we say on Rosh Hashanah. How does that sound so far?
Let's do it.
So Avinu.
Yeah, let's do it.
Avinu literally means our father. It is gendered. We can talk about God as a father. There's actually also imagery of God as a mother in different places. God as a parent. And when we say Avinu, we are approaching God as a parent and we see ourselves as God's children. Part of the implications of that, and we're going to imagine here a very healthy parent and child relationship. Of course, there's other versions of that, but I'll name two implications. One is, in an ideal world, you know that your parent always wants to see you. And you know that your parent is compassionate and that your parent wants the best for you. And that if you ask something, your parent will do the best to help you out. In an ideal world, when you stand in relationship to your parent, you also think about your siblings. They are also beloved children that stand before their parent. And there's something very powerful about saying we are your fellow children. You want us to be together. You have even more happiness when we are together. There's actually a poem that I want to mention in relation to this. So this is I don't know, have you ever done Rosh Hashanah in Sephardic services, Noam?
No. I'm ready. When I get the invite, I'm there.
So there's a poem that we say on Rosh Hashanah in our Sephardic communities that is very powerful. It's my favorite song, I think, of the entire day.
What is it?
It's called Oked ve'anekat ve'amizbeach.
So it's about Isaac?
Yes. Okay. So this is a poem that was composed by a medieval Rabbi Yehuda ben Shmuel ibn Abbas. And it's really a retelling of the binding of Isaac. And it describes it narrative-wise. It's sung actually by the community before the shofar is blown. And it describes, God telling Abraham to take his son, Abraham doing it, Sarah's anguish at her son being taken. It's a very, 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 very powerful poem. And the entire experience of singing it, part of the reason that I love it, this is my own interpretation, not everybody feels it this way. But to me, before we blow the shofar, we are standing there and we are turning to God and we say, look at our people. Look at your children across time and space. Look at what we've been willing to do for you. Look at how great we are, okay? That we stand here honoring the covenant you made with our ancestors so long ago. Think about how much you have loved us, how much you treasure us. Think about all of these things as you look at us this year, God, in the Day of Judgment. To me, Noam, one of the attitudes that I'm taking this Rosh Hashanah, in the shadow of October 7th, is I am holding on very, very, very strongly to all of the feelings of absolute love for the Jewish people that I have this year. Turning to God and saying, God, I have never been more in love with our people than I have been in this last year. That has been such a difficult and cruel and challenging year. And to me, part of the way that I'm walking into Rosh Hashanah is I want to walk as the children and turn to God and say, look at us, look at what we've done. And not only as a theological statement, God, look at us, but also turn to each other and say, we are facing so much. The challenges are there. The hatred is there. The war is there. It doesn't take it away. But we've also discovered so much. We have discovered that we are siblings. We have discovered that we stand together, right? It's almost like when there's like siblings that don't talk, but someone's in crisis. So everybody's like, oh, these are my brothers and sisters. We've discovered that. And part of what, to me, this song represents, this poem, is a way of like reminding Zchut Avot, like the merit of our foreparents, very Sephardic thing to do. And to me, it's the merit of our people, of saying like, our people is magnificent. We have strength that we didn't realize we did. And we have a responsibility to look at this year and to figure out what are we going to build with this strength.
Love that. So it's a feeling, I never viewed what you just said about the concept of our Father as not just the loving and the compassion and your parent wants to do the best for you, but the different framing now is that you have to remember that your parent has other children and that you have a relationship to those siblings, and that nothing makes a parent more sad when their siblings aren't talking to each other. If one sibling's doing really well and another sibling's not doing well, then the parent's not happy. But when they're talking to each other, when they love each other, when they care for each other, when they're spending time with each other, when they're actually, crying for each other and laughing with each other, then the parent feels so much joy. Nothing brings the parent more joy than to see the siblings laughing together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just a way for us to remind us that we're standing here, yes, with the darkness and the burden, but also, you mentioned joy before. To me, there's real joy in having rediscovered this sense of thick solidarity in our people. We have to not forget that, even at the most critical moments in the day of judgment. But we can then talk about Malkenu, right? Malkenu is us standing before God and addressing God as a ruler, as a monarch, as a king, someone who, especially in ancient days, had absolute control. You could live or die based on what the king decides when you stand before them. And Rosh Hashanah, for many of us this year, is going to be a day that really brings to our minds and our heart and to the forefront of our thinking all of these reminders of how fragile we are, of how much our fates are up to God and transcendent, forces that we can't control. And the poem actually that's come to mind, and Noam, this is a poem that you say in synagogue. We actually don't say it in Sephardic communities, but it's one of the most famous poems in Ashkenazi Jewish liturgy, which is
Unatan
Tokef.
Unatan, yeah. Yes, when I found out that Sephardic Jews don't say that, my mind was blown. Yeah, totally blown. I couldn't believe that. When I think of my entire childhood, and when I think of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and where the kids are running through the hallways in synagogue, I don't care if you're religious, you're not religious, it doesn't matter. Those parents would pick you up by the ears to get you in synagogue to listen to the Unatan Tokef and focus on it. And then we have this traditional story that's probably not so historical, or let me say it better.
It's Jewish memory. It's Jewish memory, not Jewish history.
It's part of Jewish memory. It's Jewish memory. And whether or not this exact story happened is immaterial to the fact that stories like this happened all the time, in which there was a rabbi named Amnon of Mainz. And by the way, if any, Rabbi J.J. Schachter, he teaches this whole story and the history of it, so you should definitely check that out. But it's a story of when this rabbi was tortured and mutilated for refusing to convert to Christianity. The bishop said, you got to convert. He spent a few days not responding. He eventually does respond and is unwilling to do that, unwilling to convert. But by virtue of the fact that he even considered it, he was so despondent that he even didn't immediately respond and say no. And so the story is that the Unatan Tokef comes from the Rabbi Amnon of Mainz from Germany. And it's an intense text.
By the way, when I was a kid, I spent some years in Ashkenazi communities. My dad was the rabbi of an Ashkenazi synagogue for some years. So I've inherited the songs from both traditions.
I'll just say some of it in English. On Rosh Hashanah, it is inscribed, and on the fast of Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many people shall pass away? How many people will be born? Who will live? Who will die? It's who by water, who by fire, who by sword. It's so painful to say it this year. Who by plague? Who by suffocating? Who by stoning? Who's gonna be able to get through this? And then we say three things, and it's hard to translate the Hebrew here, but three things will either help you avert the decree or help you uproot the decree, depending on your translation, or go through the decree, depending on your translation. But we say repentance, prayer, and righteousness. That ultimately either uproots or averts or gets you through the severity of the decree. And that is the crescendo, the climax of the prayer experience in the Ashkenazi world for the last 700 years.
Yeah, even Noam, as you were reading it, my mind is just going to things that I've read and watched that happened on October 7th. Terrible tragedies that happened to our people.
And not just on October 7th, for the last year.
Yes. Can I share one more quick idea with you, Noam? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sharing very, very quick, one more idea that I love, and I'll acknowledge Rabbi Yoni Rosensweig, also from Israel. I love bringing Torah from Israel these days. I read this from him a couple of years ago. He wrote there about like the rabbinic statement that on Rosh Hashanah we come before God, and the rabbis describe us coming before God as sheep, basically. Okay, Bnei Maron, we go before God, we're counted. You can, of course,
sheep.
Am I pronouncing it right?
No, you did. I just missed it. No, you got it. You nailed it. I thought you were talking about a boat for a second, but no, sheep.
Okay.
I'm with you.
That would be a different metaphor that we could do a Dvar on. But that's a good game, right? How many metaphors can we do with the different words that Mijal mispronounces? But in this case, by the way, we can build up a lot of meanings around the metaphor. Like, what does it mean that we go before God in this way, right? That we're literally like sheep. I'm going to say it wrong now. And like that there's, what's our purpose in this world based on this? And Rabbi Yoni Rosensweig and others have pointed out that there's actually questions around the manuscript of the words of the sages, and that this might be describing us going before God like sheep, or it might be describing Kimnu Meron, which is like a battalion of soldiers. So you can imagine for a second, even in this one rabbinic statement, right? We are told you're either going like sheep who don't actually know fully what's flying, and then God, like not the farmer, the shepherd, whatever. Sorry, I clearly don't know enough about shepherding. There we go. And then God as a shepherd basically directs us, go this way, go that way. This is going to be your fate. We're going to use you for this, that. And there's something there that's like scary and uncertain and also honest, right? About what it means to be human, about what it means to live life. And then the second metaphor, which I actually love so much, which says this day is also a day of formation in which there is a commander-in-chief and in which we are not just taken, we are invited to stand up. And we are invited to really rise up and say, I am here. I want to serve. I want to do the following. Let me know what I can do. And that to me is like another way to think about the dual meanings of these days, and kind of like an invitation for us to lean into the different ways that we are going into it.
So it's so interesting. I'm just thinking about the concept. In Israel, the number one insult you could give to someone is to be called a friar, right? That's the number one insult. Like to be called a friar.
How do you translate that?
To become like, there's no translation. Sucker, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the right translation is. But there's a Hebrew word that I learned recently, which reminds me of this duality that you're exactly what you're talking about. There's a word called lihit karnef. I had never heard that word. Lihit karnef means to be like a rhinoceros. What it means is to essentially be someone who follows others. And it's not a good thing to lihit karnef. It's not to be like a rhinoceros, which is basically my understanding is to be like follow the sheep, be guided, be one of many, and just kind of follow what's going on. And that's one translation of what you're talking about. The other translation, the number one thing you could be in Israel and as a Zionist is not lihit karnef, but to be a soldier, to be in the battalion, to control your destiny. And that is the other understanding of what you're saying with the relationship to God. With the relationship to God, God's soldier, right? But like there's a major distinction between being in the battalion and being like a sheep. Those are two big distinctions.
And they're invitations for us, Noam. I believe that we have a roller coaster of emotions, all of us. But we also have the ability to take some time and think how we approach the holiday. Noam, I shared some songs that I really love, some prayers. Do you want to share one song that's on your mind these days?
Yeah. I want to say something about music though for a minute. I always say to myself, I'm rational, I'm refined, I'm reflective, and I sometimes feel, I'm being real with you, Mijal. I sometimes feel as though like I'm much better at being the guy with the book in prayers and reading something and being intellectual and exploring a Sefer, a book, a Hebrew book. And then what happens when I hear the singing together, the thump, thump, thump in the room, the melody, the harmony. What happens to me is it evokes a lump in my throat that I feel, but I can't describe. And then I ask myself in this, like, again, this intellectual way, this self-conscious way, is it real? Is something serious being triggered right now? But what music does, and I get self-conscious, and then I don't necessarily, engage as much as I want to and I can. And so my promise to myself this year is that I'm going to be more vulnerable. I'm going to allow that lump in my throat to be felt. I'm going to allow myself to be part of the collective. I'm willing to evoke this feeling, this musical feeling, because what music does, and it's something that the late, great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks quoted someone else, Arnold Bennett, as saying, is he said that music is a language which the soul alone understands, but which the soul can never translate. And that's the feeling. That's that lump in my throat. So I want to tell you the prayer, the song that I have in my head, and I have a lot of different ones, but Razy, my wife, said to me, she's like, there's one song that you like when in prepping for this. And I was going through the airport yesterday, running to catch my flight. And instead of listening to podcasts, I actually just put on this song on repeat. And that song is Chamol al Ma'asecha. Have mercy on those that you have made. V'tismach b'ma'asecha. Take joy in those you have made. And I want you to just hear it and to listen to it. And it's a song that when I think of, experiences with my family, with my mother and my father, Chamol al Ma'asecha is a song that my dad, like we'll be at the Rosh Hashanah table and my dad will say, sing it again, sing it again, sing it again. And we're like, Abba, like we sang it 5 times already. He's like, no, one more time. And that's what I want to evoke. I want to evoke this feeling with each other, from each other, this sibling love that we have together, that you spoke so really incredibly about, and do that even more this year. And so Chamol is on my mind. Chamol Ma'asecha. It's beautiful.
Noam, I love this song. It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it. Maybe we'll just, conclude our first time back together in a while. And I think this song and generally the high holidays just invite us to focus on what's inside, who we can be, what it means to pray, to stand before God, to think about those transcendent aspects of who we are, that are nourishing always, but especially in this difficult time. So thank you for that song. I'm gonna think about your dad asking you to sing it over and over again. It's a beautiful, beautiful. All right, Noam, Shana Tova.
All right, Shana Tova.
Wandering Jews is a production of Unpacked, a division of OpenDor Media. Subscribe to Wandering Jews wherever you're listening to this pod, and follow Unpacked at all the social media places. Just look for @JewishUnpacked. And most of all, be in touch. Write to us at wanderingjews@jewishunpacked.com. This episode was hosted by Bitton and Noam Weissman. Audio was edited by Rob Pera, and were produced by Rivki Stern.